Good morning. It is Tuesday morning, and I have been forced into my truck again, not because of the wind, but because of the rain. But that's okay, because there is the bridge in the background, and it's time for blessings from the bridge. And we continue in Matthew chapter 5 on the Sermon on the Mount. And we come to verses 38 and 39, when Jesus says this. He says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." It's not in my nature to do what Jesus tells us to do. I don't think it's in your nature either. Because our nature, and certainly our culture, is all about payback, about getting even. That's our nature. I'm not saying we always do that, but it is our nature to feel that way when someone has hurt us, particularly someone who is evil. It's one thing if someone hurts you unintentionally, they didn't mean to. But when someone slaps you on the right cheek just because they're evil, and Jesus says, turn the other also. It's not in my nature to do that. And yet, that is the difference between the way of Jesus and the way of this world. I've mentioned that there's a formula in this part of the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus kind of walks us through certain points of the law, and he says, you have heard it said, that is, in the law, and the teachings of the rabbi have taught you in a certain way. But I say to you, and Jesus corrects it and gives the new understanding, the new meaning of the law, the full meaning of the law, as it was meant, as it was intended by God. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. It's a hard saying. And after these verses and the verses that are to come, we've already looked at them. Jesus talks about your enemies. And he goes further. He says, love your enemies and pray for those who treat you with evil, who persecute you. Those enemies are born in situations like this, where they do something, they say something that hurts you, something that's evil. And it hurts. And your nature is to get back, to get even. Now, there's a third option. And that is that you might simply walk away from this relationship. It might be unhealthy. It might be something that's not fixable. So that's always a reasonable option sometimes as God leads. But that's not always possible. You can choose your friends. You can't choose your family, for example. And if you're facing evil from within your own family or close friends, and you don't want to terminate the relationship, Jesus suggests a way to deal with it, and that is simply to turn the other cheek. Now, that doesn't mean that you become a doormat or that you enable them, their evil. It simply means that you respond differently than they would. Let me give you a quick example. You may have heard this before. I've shared it. I mentioned about Bernard O'Reilly, the bully who lived down the road from us, who bullied me and other younger kids. He came up from Boston, stayed with his aunt and uncle. And my mother was well aware of what was going on with Bernard. And actually, she worked as a waitress at his aunt and uncle's restaurant. And I don't know whether she ever said anything to them about Bernard, but I know that she said something to Bernard. Because one day I came home for dinner, there was an extra place set at the table, and it was for Bernard. She had invited him to dinner. That was a very uncomfortable meal for me, but it was something that really turned Bernard's life around. He would later become a Christian, I think in part because of the love that he witnessed in my mom and the way she responded to him. He would visit her years later when he had twin boys and recount that story of how she reached out to him in love. So it does make a difference. It's a different way of thinking and dealing with the difficult people in our lives, the evil people in our lives, and those who may have become enemies. So, as hard as it is, ask God to help you to deal in the way that Christ would deal with your enemies, and love them and pray for them. God bless your Tuesday.